This broadcast of Education and Perspectives is paid for by Medgar College.
Now, this is the temple of Karnak, and its most ancient name is Warit. This temple, as you heard before, started its construction in the beginning of the New Kingdom. And many pharaohs contributed to this complex. First of all, this complex is 100,000 square feet. It is the largest temple complex anywhere in the world. In the ancient times, you would have found two obelisks here, and we're going to see the most obelisks or benbens in all of Egypt situated right in this complex. But what we have here is a processional way that leads us all the way down through this north to south access, and it's punctuated by this avenue, which is called the Avenue of the Sphinxes. This avenue stretches about approximately 1 mile long from this temple, the temple of Waret, to the temple of Waset. There was a very important festival held once a year called the Opet Festival. It's a celebratory festival where the god Amun, to whom this temple is dedicated to, his back would be removed from, and we go into the Amun's chapel, all the way and moved over to Waset temple. Here we have, this is the first time we are seeing these type of sphinxes. The head of the ram that you see on the sphinx is a representation, is another representation of Amun, the god Amun, who is the major deity of the south. We know him, and we still don't know him. It is this deity that we invoke at the end of our Christian prayer. We said Amen. So this is God here. Now, these sphinxes are called cryo-sphinxes. And the sphinxes were done during the time of Ramses the Great. Head of a ram, body of a lion. And you can see that in the hallway of each of these sphinxes, you see the emblematic representation of the pharaoh on both sides. All right? Now we are approaching the first of several pylons in this huge complex. You can't say a temple because there are several temples within it. And for the first time, we get to see some of the architectonics, the logistics of how this particular pylon and how perhaps all pylons were created. Now let's move towards the pylon. Everybody knows what a pylon is, right? Yes, it's a gateway that signals you're about to enter a court. And you notice that the technique used for the construction of the pylon is very similar to the technique that they use in other buildings, and cutting these large blocks, placing them one on top of the other as they go forward. Now, how did they move these heavy pieces of stone all the way up? Let me show you how. Come behind here. Here's a mud brick ramp, still intact from ancient times, that was used to take the workers level after level after level, all the way up. So all this conversation about they use levitation to move stones and so forth, you know all those things are just part of the aliens. All those just part of the soap opera around these temples, right? So this is how pylons were finally put together. Now, this is a very important piece of sculpture, and it is the representation of Tutankhamun as a sphinx. of course, we should not be surprised that his disfigured part of the face is chopped off, but I want you guys take a photograph, click a photograph looking at him and a photograph in the back as well. He's dressed in the everyday headdress. Tutankhamun as a sphinx. I'm also going to show you Tutankhamun again in Luxor Temple and also further up in this temple as well. What we're moving towards now would have been a Hyperstar Hall with columns like that. Built by the pharaoh Tahaka, one of the great pharaohs that came in the 7th century BC to restore Egypt to its former greatness. But this is the only standing and remaining of the columns, this colonnade here. I want us to take a detour to our right because this previews another temple we're going to visit later on. This particular little temple was built during the reign of Ramses III. Let's go in, because it foreshadows his large mortuary temple that we will visit tomorrow. So this is like the thumbnail sketch that you are going to experience before you get to that much larger complex tomorrow. So I mentioned Tutankhamun already. I mentioned Tahaka. And now I'm mentioning the last of the great pharaohs of Egypt, Ramses III. This court mirrors one of the courts that you will see when we go to Ramses' mortuary temple tomorrow. Here Ramses is standing against a squared pillar in the posture of the Assyrian posture, the Assyrian pose. So this squared court that you see here, you will see a much more overblown and a much more detailed court when you go to his mortuary temple. I also want to say to you that the New Kingdom is characterized by very large complexes and very large images of the pharaohs and the deities. Now, in the Old Kingdom, the heights of architectural structure was the pyramids. In the New Kingdom, the height of architectural structure and their mastery over stone are temples. All right? So, let's move back out. Ramses III. Now here's the Hyperstar Hall. Yes. With its 134 columns, 12 of which are approximately 69 or 70 feet high. But at the beginning of the Hyperstar Hall is an image of Amun. But in this instance, this particular face is that of Tutankhamun as Amun. Yes. Everybody's got that? Okay, so now let's move down to Hyperstar Hall. Let's go to the right hand side. So you have these 12 colossi, open papyrus columns, and both on the right hand side and the left hand side, you also have a composition of 122 of these columns. These are about 70 feet high, and these are about 49, 50 feet high. Above are these columns uphold these lintels, these great huge slabs of stone, and that the opening at the top allows sunshine to come in. It's called the clerestory. If you come this way, you could get it better. And I've been hearing people say, oh, well, I'm not seeing the color. Now, we're beginning to see a lot more color now. Now, let's proceed down one of these passageways. You guys know how massive these are? This is the base alone of the column. Let's go to the walls in the back. Talk about this particular wall. Here is a register of Ramses the Great, wearing the warrior helmet. You notice now, that's not the plume, nor is it the double crown. This is the helmet that was worn by pharaohs when they went into battle. And Ramses is offering incense to the back of Amun. And why do we know it's the back of Amun? Because of the ram head that we see at the beginning of the back. Amun Ra. You see Amun, and then above him is the sun disk. You would have found the back, the sculpture of Amun himself there. All right. Come over here. I want to bring you closer. Come closer. Don't be afraid. And what I'm entreating you to do is to observe the skill and the craftsmanship that is brought to bear on these walls as opposed to the ones that you saw yesterday and day before. Right. It's a procession, so you have many people. And they're attempting on a two-dimensional plane to show a three-dimensional recession of people. I just wanted you to see this. So this is one of the ways we can identify the difference between Ptolemaic temples and Ptolemaic shrines as compared to that of Egyptian, particularly New Kingdom. All right. Now the function, let me talk to you more about it. The function of the pharaoh was to make sure that he demonstrated supreme control over everything in nature. And so, let me show you one of the many scenes that does that. But before we get there, here is the deity. Who knows this deity here? In his head with the stylus. Who knows this deity? Yes. Yes. Huh? Yes. Tahuti. Tahuti described. And that's Ramses. Notice his position, the position of obeisance. Comes before Amun and Khonsu and Mut. Mut, Amun, and Khonsu. So you're going to find that this trinity is replicated over and over again in this area. This was constructed, the builders or the architects of the structure dug down into the bedrock, as it were, and carved out a square base out of the live rock on which we stand. What you're seeing here is the twin towers of this temple. And these two obelisks, these two benbens, were erected by, yes, these two benbens were erected by Queen Hatshepsut. One for Thutmose I, which is approximately 64 feet high. And then the other that is dedicated to her, which is about 96 feet high. These two obelisks are cut from one piece of granite coming out of the Aswan quarries where we visited. But let me take this occasion also to talk to you a little more about the obelisks and why they were erected. Obelisks were generally erected for gods, deities, as a matter of fact, and for royalty, that is to say the pharaohs. And so in this particular instance, Hatshepsut, this female pharaoh, the queen who was to be king, and who in fact was king in the 18th dynasty over Egypt. She ruled over Egypt in the 18th dynasty as a pharaoh of both the north and the south. After we leave here, we go to her temple, but she got a lot of opposition to her reign. And so one of the ways of making sure that she convinces everyone that she deserves to ascend the throne rather than her younger brother or stepson, Thutmose III, was that she claimed direct lineage from the god Amun. Now, if you are the daughter of Amun, who dare challenge you? And so, with all of her political savviness and her cleverness, she wanted to make sure that she left behind an instrument, or she left behind a monument in this particular instance that did mark the time of her reign, her jubilee. Usually, obelisks are erected at the jubilee time. I talked to you about the Jubilee Court when we were at Saqqara. Do you remember at what time that happened? 30 years. And what was it called? The Jubilee, right? It marks the reign of the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh had to renew himself, and in this instance herself. But here's what Hatshepsut did. Even before her 30th year, she erected this obelisk as part of her legitimacy and her coronation, thereby silencing her critics once again. Now, the top of the obelisk, there's a pyramidoid. And that pyramidoid was usually covered with electrum, that is to say, a combination of both silver and gold placed on it. And so when the sun rose, and you notice here, if we had gotten here much earlier, even though there's no longer any metal on it, the light of the sun would reflect its ray across this complex and beyond. And so Queen Hatshepsut made sure that she positioned herself very favorably in the annals of all of the great leaders of ancient Egypt, particularly in the New Kingdom. Now, one last thing I want to say about the obelisks. These obelisks, there were many obelisks all over Egypt. But some of the largest ones, I believe the largest obelisk, standing obelisk today, stands in the center of the Vatican. It was removed from here, appropriated by Christianity, placed in the center of the Vatican, and a cross was placed on top of it to make sure that this culture and its religious theosophy was debased, in other words, by placing a cross on top of it. Do you have any questions before we move forward? Because I want to move out of here and just go to another court area. Hyperstar Hall.
When you say it was appropriated, is that
like stealing? Yeah. Stolen.
Perhaps they saw it as a cornerstone of Christianity?
Perhaps not. It was not the cornerstone. It was never meant to be the cornerstone of Christianity. It was meant, listen, religions are generally used as instruments or events of control and domination. Yes, conquerors. In this instance of Christianity, there are many crusades. We know about all those crusades in Christianity. And this is part of a silent crusade that still is taking place today. All right? So can we move out and go further down the Central Avenue? This is the Jubilee Hall of Thutmose III. And for the first time, we are seeing columns with this upside down capital. Let's move right down to the bottom there because I want to show you the Trinity again. Take your time, Joan. Now this is the disfigured Trinity. It's Amun, Konsu, and Mut. Mut. Yes. Sky. Yeah. Mut. And that destruction to take out the female was done during the Christian era. So that there's this Holy Ghost that is a female is now removed from it. So you can see Father and part of Son, but no female in the Trinity. Now there's a lot of other defacement in this chapel, this Jubilee Chapel of Thutmose III.
It has many good colors and there's a star.
Alright. Okay, let me begin to show you a few of them. Because I think I'm making up stories here, but Christians.
Star.
Yeah.
And a star.
Now we're seeing much clearer the illustration of this heavenly astronomical body. This heavenly body, the stars. It would have been in blue, the canopy in blue, with golden stars. Remember I told you, in Egypt you got to look up to see. And over here, I've never seen this one before. You have what is called the Jed Column. An illustration of the Jed Column. See a pair of them there? With the spine of Osiris. We're going to see that a lot when we go to Abydos in the last day before we leave. Now, I want to show you the presence of Christianity here, not only with the attempt to destroy the Trinity and remove the female. Let's go this way. Right. On the column, the Christians came and they placed their iconography of their major deity, Jesus, on this. When this was constructed, there was no Christianity. And over here we see it again, with the halo. Again here, they put it in mark. A certain animal tries to mark its territory, what it does is graffiti, of course. Of course it's graffiti. Yeah. But this is the way. Remember I told you about the obelisk in the center of the Vatican? And I'm helping to make my point much clearer to Aisha. Placing the cross on top of the obelisk, placing an image of Jesus on the columns, and Jesus had nothing to do with this. And also an attempt to destroy the female or to obliterate or remove her from the Trinity. I'm not making none of this stuff up. I'm showing you. And I'm not making any judgments about what you think, what you know, how you feel, what you should change. I'm not about to do any part of that. All I'm simply doing, right, is guiding you. I'm not even the messenger. All I'm doing is being the guide to show you that. Okay? So this is the first time we see these upside down, as it were, capitals. I've not seen any columns like this before. And these columns are particularly associated with Thutmose III, while we'll find some illustrations of it at Abydos, the last stop on this train. All right, so there are 3 kiosks here. So let's go and pay a visit. Twin Towers. We all can't get in here, but this is the shrine, a shrine for Ptah.
This one looks different.
Why he's seated.
This was constructed, the builders or the architects of the structure dug down into the bedrock, as it were, and carved out a square base out of the live rock on which we stand.
This broadcast of Education and Perspectives is paid for by Medgar College.